Welcome back to another Boardroom Briefing. I am your host, Paul Maskill, and today we're going to talk about the moment every real turnaround eventually reaches. It's not a tactic, it's not a spreadsheet, not a motivational breakthrough, it's a decision. Because every underperforming business eventually arrives at a point where the owner can no longer solve the problems with just pure grit, effort, optimism, or time. At some point, the business requires a decision that changes the structure. It requires us to do something differently in order to get different results. You've probably heard that before, the definition of insanity. And that's the part most owners avoid the longest. Not because they're weak, not because they're lazy, not because they don't care, but because these decisions are usually really difficult. They're expensive emotionally before they become valuable financially. So, in this briefing, we are going to walk through the illusion owners live in before a turnaround decision is made, what the real decision actually is, why so many owners avoid it, and what the disciplined operators do differently to make sure they never run into this problem in the first place. So, the big illusion that most business owners have when they're in this position is maybe it'll turn around on its own. And they convince themselves 100 different ways why it could turn around. Not that it will, but it could. But before a turnaround really begins, most owners spend time living in a very specific illusion. They believe that this business is going to correct itself without a structural decision. The internal dialogue that we convince ourselves with sounds something like, well, we just need one good month, or we just need to get a little bit better every month. We need to just get through this season. Once a few things settle down, this should improve. There's a few one-time expenses. We're never going to have those again, and things should improve. We're so close. We don't need to make a major move yet, and maybe we don't need to at all, because when we get to the next point, we're going to need all these people and things and all this stuff in place. But here's the thing, you might not ever get there. And because the business is often still functioning, still producing revenue, still operating day to day, phones still ring and trucks are still busy, that story feels 100% believable. And then we read about other people on social media and we see all the posts of, well, they're doing it, why can't I? The company's not dead. The team is still there. Customers are still calling. Revenue is still being generated. So we continue to stay in motion. The owner keeps moving forward. They work a little bit harder. They keep pushing. They delay the hard decision. They tell their vendor all the excuses in the world. They tell themselves all the excuses in the world. They're really just pushing everything back due to this illusion. But real turnarounds do not begin when the owner gets more motivated, when they start working harder. They begin when the owner gets more decisive, when they get more clarity, and that's what most owners avoid. What makes a turnaround so difficult are these decisions. The decisions that matter most are never a small one when we get to that point. And they're never a small one because we avoided the small ones for so long that now they are big ones. It's usually a structural decision that the owner has felt coming for a while. And I think the tough part for a lot of owners in this situation is they might not know exactly what they need to do. They have the feelings, and it usually goes back to they're not using numbers to guide their company. We as fractional CFOs, myself included, that's exactly what we do. So we can remove the emotion, we can remove the ego, we can remove the excuses. And the numbers, if you know how to read them and they're accurate, will tell you exactly what you need to do. Some of those things that need to be done are changing pricing in a meaningful way, reducing or restructuring overhead, addressing underperforming people, having the difficult conversations with them, simplifying our service mix instead of just chasing all the revenue we can, changing how work is sold, changing our sales process, or changing our dispatch process, and bringing in a level of financial discipline that removes the guesswork, which I alluded to earlier. So, in other words, the turnaround begins when the owner stops trying to preserve the old version of the business. That version worked to a certain point, and if we keep doing it, we're going to continue to get the same results. And that's the real decision. The decision is not just what should we do. The real decision is what are we willing to stop protecting? And when we can look at it through that lens, it gets a lot easier. Because most struggling businesses are not being held back by a lack of intelligence. They're not being held back by a lack of hard work. They're being held back by a structure that the owner knows is no longer working, but is not fully confronted yet. So, why do these owners avoid the decision? That really is the heart of this entire issue that a majority of businesses go through. The ones who get real and get honest and get vulnerable can see the other side of the others. They disappear. The statistics show there's a reason so many businesses do not make it till their fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th birthday, whatever stats you want to read. So why do owners avoid the decision they know they probably need to make? Because the cost of the decision feels immediate, but the benefits feel delayed. And we are an instant gratification being. We are an instant gratification world. We are living in an instant gratification society. And lastly, the emotional resistance is real. For example, going back to the examples that we use, changing pricing risks pushback. It risks pushback from our team, from our comfort advisor, from our service techs, from our customers. And it's scary. And we don't want that pushback. We don't want that friction. We don't want that confrontation. Restructuring overhead creates discomfort because maybe we have to take away things that people actually like. Maybe we have to take away things that we thought would drive certain behaviors and they didn't, because then people just got used to them. And we don't want to create discomfort for anybody on our team because we're the ones that have to deal with them every day. It could include addressing people. When we address people, it creates tension. We have the difficult conversations when it comes to performance or attitude. And we might have some top performers who are just cancers to the organization and they're culture killers, but they're producing and we need the revenue. So addressing that creates tension. Simplifying our service mix can feel like we're giving something up. We convince ourselves all day long that, yeah, but it's not that much work. And even though new construction doesn't produce as much gross profit, it's pretty hands off. And, it's really just money to the bottom line because we don't really need to do anything with it. And that's always never true. And lastly, admitting that the current model is not working can feel personal because it's our baby. It's what we've built. And we have to admit that our baby's ugly. Our baby doesn't feel good. And it's because of us. And now we need to change it. So what do? Normally, the owner delays, not because they're confused, but because they're attached. Attached to the way the business has been run, attached to certain people, attached to certain assumptions, attached to the idea that they can solve the problem without disrupting the structure and the culture of the organization. And this is why the turnaround decision is often delayed long after the business started sending signals. The other parts of that is a lot of times we don't know the signals because we don't know what to look for and we're not paying attention to the numbers. We've run our business historically off of hard work, grit, perseverance, feel, emotion, gut feeling, and not the numbers, which is fine when you're you and a couple people. But now that when you're a real organization, we need to use the numbers in order to do so. The owner isn't waiting for more information at this point. They're often waiting to be emotionally ready, and that delay is super expensive. It's admitting that they, quote unquote, failed, even though they didn't. Failure is only when you quit. If otherwise, you're just learning and improving, but that hit to the ego hurts. So what happens when these decisions get delayed if you aren't totally sure what happens? The longer the structural decision is delayed, the fewer options the business has when it is time to make a decision. That is one of the most important truths in any turnaround. If you are struggling, the longer you delay taking action, the fewer options you have to get out of this mess. Delay does not preserve flexibility, it reduces it. The longer you wait because you're not emotionally ready is going to make it even harder when you actually have to take action. When the owner waits too long, cash gets tighter, stress gets heavier. The wrong people stay too long. The right people leave too soon. Pricing remains weak. We continue to chase revenue. Debt becomes more normal and eventually becomes unbearable, and we can't make debt service. And confidence continues to drop internally, externally, within your family, within your team, and the customers can tell as well. And eventually, you are the owner. You're holding the bag. The owner is forced to make these decisions under pressure that could have been made a lot earlier, a lot easier, with a lot less pain, with far more control if it was just done sooner. This is why delayed decisions are so expensive. This is why I encourage everybody, if you do not feel like you are in a healthy cash position, please reach out. The sooner you do, the better. I talk to way too many people who are at the point of no return where I can't help them because they've maxed out their lines of credit. All their vendors are screaming, asking for money. And people are leaving, their gross profits toast, and they don't have enough time to get out of that hole. Whereas if they would have reached out 12 to 18 months earlier, we could have solved it and avoided the entire thing with a lot easier decisions and a lot less stress. So that's why delayed decisions are so expensive. Not because they prolong the problem, but because they change the context in which the decision eventually gets made in. A calm decision is almost always better than a pressured one. And every week of avoidance usually increases the cost of action later. Let me say that again. Every week of avoidance usually increases the cost of action later. So the real risk here is we think as owners that delaying is safer, and we just continue to kick the can down the road. Most owners treat delay like the safer option. It feels less disruptive. It's less emotional. It's less confrontational. It's easier. We don't have to do anything difficult, right? And our brain wants to keep us happy and keep us surviving. So we're just going to avoid all that conflict that we know is coming. But in turnarounds, delay is often the riskier move. Almost always it is the riskier move, unless you're waiting to be saved by somebody with a whole bunch of money who doesn't want to take a big part of your company. Because the business is already paying for the problem. It's paying through all the things we talked about: weaker margins, tighter cash flow, lower confidence, slower decision-making, and a significant reduction in the value of your company. So while the owner feels like they are avoiding the pain, the business is quietly absorbing it and dying every single day. And that's why disciplined operators eventually recognize something more powerful, that not deciding is still a decision. If you decide to kick the can down the road, that is making a decision. And in most struggling business, it's the most expensive one. So as we start to wrap this up, just like every episode, what does the disciplined operator do? They decide before pressure decides for you. When pressure decides for you, you don't have many options and you're at the mercy of a lot of different things. Disciplined operators understand that every turnaround has a decision gate, a point where they must stop asking whether the change is emotionally comfortable, and they need to start asking whether it's structurally necessary. They can start to feel it. You know it's not right. The questions they are asking are, what are we protecting that the business can no longer afford? Let me say that again. What are we protecting that the business can no longer afford? Is it the fancy office? Is it too many vehicles? Is it too many people in the office? Is it underperforming staff? Which decision have we already delayed too long? There are so many decisions when I work with clients that once they make them, they're like, why didn't we do this a year ago when you told me to? And I say, I don't know, but it's never as hard as we think it is. Once we do it, by the next day, we've forgotten about it and we move on because we are resilient, we are entrepreneurs, and we move on to the next task at hand. They also ask, what would improve if we acted now instead of later? Think about that. What would improve? So what could you improve today if you acted today instead of later? There are probably 5 different things that you know if you took action on today, it would improve probably by tomorrow. The other question is, are we preserving the old model or are we building a healthier one? So businesses growth goes in stages. You need certain skill set, certain work ethic, certain ability to get to 1 million. But then you go to 1 to 3 million, it's going to take a different skill set. It's going to be a different model. It's going to be a different team. And then to go from 3 to 5, same thing. You got to reinvent yourself again. You've got to change things up. You've got to build a different model because certain models break and then we got to switch it up. And then you go from 5 to 10, again, you got to do something new again. So the longer you preserve the old model, the harder it will be to build a healthier new one to get to the next level. And the last question, if we keep waiting, what gets more expensive? Do the basic math, do the basic projections, do the basic vision work. If we keep waiting, what is this going to look like? And many times I have these conversations with clients of like, look, historically, if we keep waiting, this is what's going to happen. You have the payroll of a $10 million company and you've never cracked 7. So saving all these people to get so they're ready when we get to 10 is probably never going to happen. So why don't we build a $7 million business and build it super profitably? Because otherwise it's just going to continue to get more expensive, and growth takes cash, and we don't have cash, we're not growing. And if you're not growing, you're going the other way. Nothing stays the same. We're either growing or we're dying. And that mindset changes everything, because disciplined operators stop treating decisions as disruption. They start treating it as leadership. And that's what a leader does. They make the tough decisions that nobody else wants to. There's a reason most people work for somebody else, because it's a lot easier. You just show up and do what people tell you you're going to do. You can just kind of float your way through. But in order to be a leader, an entrepreneur, a business owner, someone who sells their business someday, you got to be able to make these tough strategic decisions sooner rather than later. And then once the right decision is made, the turnaround can actually begin. Not because every problem disappears. It's not going to solve all the problems, but because the business finally stops funding a structure that no longer works. And you start to build a foundation that actually does work so the business can be financially healthy. If your business is under pressure and you can feel that a real decision is coming or you've been delaying it for too long, please don't confuse that delay with safety. In most cases, the longer you wait, the fewer options you keep. And when we have less options, it's a lot harder to run our business and it's a lot harder to get out of where we're at, because every turnaround eventually requires you, the owner, to make a decision that changes the structure, changes the direction, and changes the financial health of the business. And the owners who make those decisions earlier preserve more cash, have more clarity, and have more control. If this conversation resonated with you, head on over to my website, thebluecollaradvisors.com. There you can learn more about how I work with owners. You can book a call if it makes sense. You can download my pricing calculator and explore the show notes and additional resources that we have on the website. Again, it's thebluecollaradvisors.com. Remember, this podcast exists to create clarity. And if this helped provide a little bit of clarity, a little bit of kick in the pants for you, you are exactly where you need to be. I'll see you guys in the next boardroom briefing.